President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation hoping to restore calm, but the EFF had other plans. Within hours, Julius Malema unleashed a furious response, calling the speech an insult to South Africans. From failed promises to rising public outrage, this explosive reaction may reshape the political landscape. Stay tuned as we unpack the storm brewing between power and the people. In the wake of President Cyril Ramaphosa's recent address to the nation, the political atmosphere in South Africa has become nothing short of electric. The Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, South Africa's third-largest party and arguably its most vocally radical opposition force, has once again seized the national spotlight with a fiery, uncompromising reaction that has left supporters energized and critics rattled. Julius Malema and his party wasted no time dissecting the president's words, pulling no punches in what they view as yet another display of calculated political theater devoid of substance, vision, or urgency. For the EFF, Ramaphosa's speech symbolized everything wrong with the current administration: detached leadership, delayed accountability, and a deepening betrayal of the very people who put their faith in the promises of liberation. What was meant to be a moment of national reassurance has, instead, escalated into a war of words that could shape the tone of South African politics for months to come. The EFF, with their trademark red berets and unapologetic rhetoric, immediately issued a public response that painted Ramaphosa not as a president leading through a storm, but as a figurehead presiding over chaos of his own making. According to the party, the president's address was nothing more than a polished script filled with half-truths, evasions, and vague commitments. Their critique was not merely about what was said, but more damningly, what was left unsaid. Malema, never one to mince his words, accused Ramaphosa of deliberately avoiding the core issues plaguing the nation: mass unemployment, rampant crime, failing public services, and the hollowing out of key state institutions. He argued that the address served no practical purpose except to manage optics ahead of growing discontent and political instability. In a charged press conference that followed the president's speech, Malema described the address as a national insult to the intelligence and suffering of the South African people. He questioned how a president can speak for nearly an hour without once presenting a tangible solution to Eskom's ongoing failure, or addressing the collapse of municipalities that can no longer even guarantee clean water or functioning roads. The EFF's response was underpinned by one central accusation: that Ramaphosa is running a government by press release, not by action. They pointed to numerous past addresses in which grand promises were made, yet implementation remained a mirage. For example, Malema referenced the president's repeated vows to root out corruption and reform state-owned enterprises. According to the EFF, not only has there been negligible progress on this front, but key figures in Ramaphosa's inner circle have themselves been implicated in corruption scandals, casting doubt on his credibility as a reformer. The speech, which was likely intended to create an image of calm leadership and control, instead became a canvas for the EFF to paint a picture of decline and decay. Their response carried a somber but defiant tone, emphasizing that South Africa is not merely undergoing temporary turbulence, but a systemic breakdown of governance. And in the eyes of the EFF, Ramaphosa's administration is either woefully ignorant or hopelessly paralyzed, perhaps both. Beyond the fiery words, the EFF also attempted to speak directly to the frustrations of ordinary South Africans. Their messaging tapped into widespread anger over load shedding, soaring food prices, high fuel costs, and the widening gap between the rich and poor. They argued that the president's speech offered nothing to a generation of youth stuck between unemployment lines and decaying schools, or to the elderly who feel forgotten in overcrowded clinics and underfunded rural hospitals. In essence, they accused Ramaphosa of speaking past the people, rather than to them. This moment was yet another example of how the EFF has mastered the art of political timing. By launching a scathing counter-message just hours after Ramaphosa's address, they not only ensured media coverage but also reframed the public discourse. While mainstream commentators were still passing the president's words, the EFF had already seized the narrative, placing themselves as the vanguard of accountability and radical truth-telling. It was an exercise in political maneuvering that continues to pay dividends for the party among frustrated voters seeking bold alternatives. But the EFF's attack wasn't purely rhetorical. The party also laid out demands and threats. They call for immediate action on the issues of land redistribution, the nationalization of mines and banks, and the restructuring of the Reserve Bank, all of which they claim the president has continued to sideline in favor of investor appeasement. They declared that failure to act decisively on these economic matters would result in mass mobilization and direct action. Though they did not specify what form this might take, the undertone of confrontation was loud and clear. Behind the theatrics and combative language, however, lies a deeper question that resonates with many South Africans: is the current government still capable of delivering real change? The EFF's message, love it or hate it, forces a reckoning with that question. Their ability to articulate dissatisfaction in a way that feels visceral and unfiltered has become one of their most potent tools. And with elections on the horizon and coalition talks heating up across the provinces, every word, every speech, every reaction matters. Supporters of the EFF celebrated their party's fierce opposition, sharing clips and soundbites across social media with hashtags decrying the state of the nation and praising Malema's courage. In townships and on campuses, in rural towns and urban neighborhoods, their words resonated, not always because of agreement with their ideology, but because of the shared frustration that things are simply not working. The power of the EFF's message lies not just in its critique of Ramaphosa, but in its ability to reflect the raw emotion many citizens are feeling but don't often hear in political language. Yet critics warn that while the EFF is skilled at diagnosis, it remains vague and sometimes utopian in its prescriptions. They argue that tearing down the ANC is not enough, a credible blueprint must be in place to build something better. And while the EFF has never shied away from revolutionary ideals, some observers fear that their confrontational stance risks alienating potential allies and creating further polarization in an already divided society. Still, in the aftermath of Ramaphosa's address and the EFF's blistering response, one thing is certain: the battle for the soul of South African politics is alive and intensifying. The ground is shifting. The old certainties of ANC dominance are fading, and the EFF knows it. They are not just reacting to the president's speech, they are positioning themselves for a larger role in shaping the country's future. Whether that future will be more equitable and just, or more turbulent and divided, remains to be seen.